"Oh my God, that's ugly." The nurse's voice cracked across the sterile quiet like a slap. She had just pulled back the gown on his left side. The long, ragged scar ran from ribcage to lower back, deep and pale, stitched decades ago by field medics and fate. She let out a small gasp, then laughed again, short and mocking. "Seriously, what happened to you? Looks like you lost a fight with a chainsaw." James Kearns didn't flinch. He just sat still, staring ahead. His eyes didn't blink. His hands, veined and still strong, gripped the edges of the table. One knuckle whitened. The nurse kept going. She didn't notice the intern across the room, a young woman in blue scrubs, frozen mid-step, holding a patient chart like it might shatter. "Well, at least they stitched it up, I guess." Yikes. The blood pressure cuff on James's arm beeped twice, loudly. Then again. Off-tempo. The nurse turned to adjust the machine, still chuckling under her breath. The intern moved, not with panic, but precision. She glanced at the open chart in her hand. Her eyes caught a line written in neat black ink. Vietnam veteran, bronze star, Purple Heart. Her expression changed. James sat in silence. He'd been here before. Not this building, not this face, but this moment. The sting of ignorance. The sound of someone younger, someone protected, someone careless, laughing at what they did not carry. The nurse hummed softly, casual, thoughtless. The intern set the chart down on the counter, quiet, controlled. She stepped out of the room without a word. The door clicked shut behind her. James slowly reached down and pulled his shirt back over the scar. His hand trembled just slightly, then stopped. If you believe every veteran deserves respect, subscribe, because every view helps this message reach those who need it most. That morning had begun, as all his mornings did, with the groan of the floorboards beneath his feet and the sound of the kettle starting to hum. James "Jim" Kearns stood at the edge of his modest kitchen, staring at the line where sunlight touched linoleum. The house was small, silent, ordered. He moved without needing to think. First to the cupboard, then to the kettle, then to the windowsill where a lone photo sat. 4 men in muddy uniforms, arms slung over shoulders, frozen in the summer heat of 1967. One of them, the one not smiling, was Jim. He poured the water, letting the steam rise gently. Then he reached for the old quilt folded at the edge of the couch. His wife, Margaret, had stitched it by hand after his final surgery. Every patch carried a story. She'd passed away 7 years ago. He still folded it each morning, same as she did. Corners aligned, edges straight, final pat in the center. His fingers moved to the pin on the hat that hung by the door. The emblem of the United States Marine Corps, dulled by age, but not forgotten. He pinned it to the collar of his coat, not for vanity, for memory. Outside, the wind stirred the flag across the street. A boy paused on his scooter and gave it a sloppy salute. Jim smiled softly. It meant more than the boy would ever know. Today was a clinic day, a new place while the Veterans Affairs facility was under renovation. He didn't like new places. He didn't like re-explaining the scar, but he needed the blood work. So he dressed, slowly, carefully, like he had for years. He walked 2 blocks to the barbershop before the appointment. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped in. "Morning," he said. The new barber, barely older than 25, looked up from his phone. "You got an appointment?" "Just a trim." The barber raised an eyebrow as Jim settled into the chair. "What kind of cut we going for, sir?" "Short, military style." The barber chuckled, picking up the clippers. "Trying to relive the old war days, huh? You know we do modern cuts now." Jim didn't reply. He looked straight ahead at his own face in the mirror. Thin, sharp, lined by years. His eyes didn't flicker. The clippers buzzed on. Behind them, another customer coughed into his fist but said nothing. Afterward, Jim paid in cash and left a tip. The barber didn't say thank you. Jim buttoned his coat and headed toward the DMV. He needed to renew his state identification before the month's end. It was always busy, always loud, always a test of patience. He waited 37 minutes before his number was called. "James Kearns?" came the voice. A woman at the counter raised an eyebrow as she looked at him. "Oof, still driving at your age?" Jim walked up to the window, handed over his paperwork. She flipped through it with a dramatic sigh. "Let's hope you pass the vision test this time," she muttered. He didn't respond, just kept his eyes forward, reading the chart slowly, carefully, as if the letters were prayers. When it was over, he thanked her. She didn't respond. By the time he reached the clinic, the sun was already high. He checked in at the front desk, took a clipboard, sat quietly in a corner where the clock ticked too loudly. He filled out the same questions he had answered for 30 years. "Have you served in the armed forces?" "Yes." "Branch?" "United States Marine Corps. Combat experience?" "Vietnam, 1967-1968. Medals, Bronze Star, Purple Heart." He handed in the form and waited. The nurse came in. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She called his name, led him down the hall, closed the door behind him. That was the beginning of what would become the end of her career. The exam room smelled of bleach and gauze. The walls were pale green, made paler by the fluorescent lights that hummed overhead like an engine left running too long. James Kearns sat on the edge of the padded table, the paper beneath him crinkling with every shift of his boots. The nurse returned without knocking. She carried a clipboard, a blood pressure cuff, and a practiced impatience. "All right, shirt off." Jim moved slowly, unbuttoning his collar, folding it inward, and easing the shirt from his shoulders. The left side of his torso, pale, rigid, and lined by a scar thick as 2 fingers, came into view. She stopped mid-step, then laughed. "Oh my God, that's ugly." She blinked, realizing her words had left her mouth aloud. But instead of retreating, she doubled down. "What even happened to you? Did a bear maul you, or were you trying to wrestle barbed wire?" Jim didn't respond. He adjusted his posture, rested his hands on his knees. A single breath moved through his nose. The nurse chuckled again. "Looks like you lost a fight with a chainsaw." Across the room, the younger nurse, Elena, stood frozen by the cabinet. She had been shadowing the exam rotation for 2 weeks. This was her 4th patient that morning. Her chart trembled slightly in her hand as she looked down at the intake form. Vietnam veteran, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. She said nothing. Not yet. The cuff beeped once, then again. The readout blinked in amber tones. The older nurse barely noticed. "Vitals look okay. Probably shouldn't lift heavy boxes, though. Might split that Frankenstein stitch wide open." Jim turned his eyes toward her. His stare was slow and still. Not threatening, just impossible to look away from. "Those scars aren't for sympathy," he said quietly. "They're for silence." The room fell into a pause. Not silence, but that soft, uncomfortable absence that comes right before someone either realizes the damage or tightens their grip. The nurse scoffed. "Well, maybe keep them to yourself next time." Elena stepped forward, her voice almost a whisper. "Hey, I don't think—" The senior nurse snapped without turning. "You don't get it. He probably wants the attention." That's when Elena stepped back. Not because she agreed, but because something changed in her expression. It wasn't fear. It was focus. She placed the chart on the counter. Jim reached slowly for his shirt. The older nurse busied herself with data entry, muttering under her breath. Elena left the room, but this time she didn't go far. She walked directly to the hallway outside administration. Her scrubs felt too tight at the collar. Her hands shook as she typed a short message on her phone and hit send. Then she waited. Back in the exam room, the silence had grown thick. Jim buttoned his shirt. Each motion slow, deliberate. The metal scars on his side disappeared beneath the fabric, but they did not leave the room. The older nurse sighed, finally glancing back. "Wait in the lobby. They'll call you when it's time to go." Jim stood, nodded once, walked to the door. As he passed her, she smiled, like none of it had happened. "Take care." He didn't look at her. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Elena was gone, but behind her, the door to the director's office had just closed. Inside, voices began to rise. James Kearns sat alone in the waiting room. The plastic chairs were hard, angled backward in a way that made every joint ache, but he sat still, upright, his coat folded neatly on his lap. His eyes traced the smudges on the tiled floor, the way the light pooled beneath the fluorescent fixtures. He did not fidget. He did not sigh. To anyone watching, he might have looked like a man waiting for his name to be called. But inside, beneath the stillness, his pulse spoke a different story. A story he'd lived before. Across the room, a mother leaned in to whisper something to her teenage son. They both glanced toward Jim. He didn't notice. A few seats down, an older man in a Vietnam veteran's ball cap caught Jim's eye and gave a nod. Jim returned it. Behind the front desk, the receptionist glanced up from her screen, hesitated, and picked up the phone. She turned slightly away as she spoke into the receiver, too quietly to be heard. Then the door opened. Elena stepped out, still in scrubs, but now followed by a tall man in a pressed blazer. He looked too young to have gray at his temples, but it was there, just enough to command quiet. The director. He scanned the room, eyes sharp, not angry, but searching. Elena approached Jim. "Mr. Kearns," she said. Her voice was calm now, still soft but anchored. "The director would like a moment of your time, if that's all right." Jim looked up slowly. His jaw twitched once. "I'm not looking to make trouble," he said. "You're not," she replied. "But you were wronged, and that matters here." The director stepped forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Kearns, I'm Dr. Isaiah Rowe. Please, just a moment." Jim stood, took the hand firmly. His grip still held the memory of field drills and rifle recoil. They led him through a short hallway, past patient rooms, bulletin boards with outdated flyers, a door marked staff only that swung shut behind them. Inside the office, the blinds were half drawn. A framed photo of uniformed medics hung near the coat rack. The director gestured to a chair. Jim sat. Dr. Rowe didn't open with apologies. He opened with facts. "We have internal hallway audio and closed-loop recording," he said. "Most of it is auto-deleted, but your exam was part of a flagged complaint. We reviewed it immediately." He paused. Jim nodded slowly. "She said what she said." "She did," Dr. Rowe replied. "And she will answer for it." Jim shifted in his seat. "I don't need anyone fired." Elena, standing near the door, spoke next. "Sir, I'm not just a student. I'm Army Reserve, medical unit. We train to treat every scar with respect, especially the ones that earned their silence." Jim's eyes moved to her for a long moment. "You knew." She nodded. "I saw it all, and I didn't speak up soon enough." Dr. Rowe leaned forward. Her license was already under review for unrelated conduct. This was confirmation. Jim exhaled. Once, quietly. "We will speak with you again, on the record, if you're willing," the director said. "But for today, you are not the one on trial." Jim stood. Never was. They returned to the waiting room together. But something had changed. A man near the water cooler whispered to another, "That's him, the guy they're talking about." A woman stepped forward with a stroller, hesitation in her voice. "Were you the one from the Legion event last year?" Jim nodded. "My father still talks about your speech," she said. "You carried the flag for his brother." "Thank you." Another voice followed. "I think he helped train our rescue team in '95. And another. "He was there when we buried Sergeant Hollins." The room, once still, began to stir. Respect, quiet, earned, real, spread like heat through cold stone. Elena stood silently at the desk, watching. The nurse who had mocked him never re-emerged, and someone in the corner finally stood up and said, "That man shouldn't be waiting. He should be standing at the front." The jungle was alive, not just with birds or insects, but with the hum of dread. That electric stillness before something breaks. It sat on James Kearns' skin like heat, pressing into the seams of his uniform. soaking into the fabric with the weight of inevitability. He was 23, radio man for Fire Support Team Echo. The air was thick with diesel and cordite. Their unit had been pushing toward a clearing for medevac, a chopper delayed by rain and enemy movement. The canopy above wept condensation, fat droplets falling like time bombs on the leaves. His squad had already taken fire that morning. 2 wounded, 1 critical. Sergeant Buckley was barely conscious, his blood soaked into Jim's shirt as he dragged him through knee-deep mud. Every step was a prayer he didn't know how to say. Up ahead, Corporal Dance was setting a flare. A yellow smoke meant medevac. Red meant they were still under fire. Jim ducked low behind a crumbled rice paddy wall, cradling Buckley against it. "Hold tight, Sarge," he whispered. "Bird's almost here." Buckley coughed blood. Didn't reply. Then the radio crackled. "Echo team, LZ compromised. Repeat, compromised. Hostiles closing. Extraction ETA, 6 minutes." Too long, too far. Then came the scream. Dance was down. Something had clipped him through the ribs. A cry of shock, then silence. The flare dropped beside him. Jim moved, without thought, without plan, just motion. He pulled the flare, fired it skyward. Yellow, come anyway. Then he reached for Dance. That's when the mortar hit. Not direct, but close enough. Shrapnel carved across Jim's left side, tearing through muscle, biting into ribs. He dropped to one knee, vision spinning. But he did not let go. He hauled Dance's arm across his back, grabbed Buckley with the other. 3 men, 2 broken, 1 burning alive inside. The chopper came. Bullets snapped through the trees as it hovered, wind and dust turning the jungle into a storm. Jim staggered into the clearing, 1 step, then another. He reached the bird, collapsed onto the ramp as arms reached out to pull them in. He didn't remember the liftoff, only the medic's voice above him. "We've got 2 critical, 1 walking miracle." Darkness closed in. The hospital bed in Saigon was cold. Jim's side was wrapped from shoulder to waist. He couldn't move his arm. A nurse adjusted the blanket and said, "You're lucky, soldier." He stared at the ceiling. "They make it, both of them, thanks to you." Another voice, older, hoarse, stepped in. A surgeon. "You're going to have a scar, son. One hell of a scar." Jim nodded once. "Then it'll remind me he got to live." The room fell silent again. But inside, the words carved themselves into the memory. Not for medals, not for speeches, just for the man he carried, just for getting him home. He awoke the next day with his first letter from Margaret. It smelled like lavender. James Kern stepped back into the waiting room like a man returning from war, not with wounds fresh, but with something deeper. A stillness forged in fire, now carried into places that had forgotten what sacrifice looked like. The air in the clinic had changed. It wasn't loud, but it was charged. Patients glanced up from their phones. A father near the window nudged his son and whispered something. Eyes began to follow Jim, not with curiosity, but with recognition. He made his way to his chair, but before he could sit, the director called from the hallway. "Mr. Kearns, if you'll wait just another moment." Jim nodded. No impatience, no pride. The door to the staff corridor opened again. The nurse emerged. She didn't smile this time. Her face was pale, not with guilt, but with consequence. Behind her, Dr. Rowe walked with firm, measured steps. Elena followed, her expression unreadable. The nurse stopped at the edge of the room where the staff desk met the hall. Dr. Rowe stepped forward. His voice was clear. "To everyone here," he said, "this morning a member of our staff acted in a manner that disrespected one of our patients, a decorated United States Marine and combat veteran. That behavior has no place in our facility. Not today. Not ever." The room stilled. Jim said nothing. His hands were folded over his coat. Dr. Rowe continued, turning toward the nurse. "Effective immediately, Nurse Olivia Marek is suspended pending final review. Her conduct violates the ethical standards of this institution and the codes set forth by our licensing board." The nurse looked down at her feet. A voice from the chairs broke the silence. It was the older man with the Vietnam hat. "Damn right it does." Another voice. The mother with the stroller. "He's more than a patient. He's a legacy." A quiet round of murmurs followed. Someone clapped. Then a second person joined in. Then 5. It wasn't loud. It wasn't staged. It was reverent. The nurse left without a word. As the door clicked shut behind her, a man in a wheelchair rolled forward, a younger veteran, scarred across the chin, one leg missing beneath the blanket. He stopped in front of Jim and saluted. Jim stood, slow but upright, and returned it, palm flat, sharp, precise. No words passed between them. None were needed. Then, as if the floodgate had opened, people began to rise. A teenage girl stepped forward and offered him a paper cup of water. A man with a cane patted his shoulder. "My father served. You remind me of him." The receptionist behind the desk wiped her eyes and stood as well. Dr. Rowe turned to the room. "Mr. Kearns, on behalf of this facility, I want to invite you back. Not as a patient, but as a teacher." Jim raised an eyebrow. "We're starting a new internal program, respecting veteran patients. I'd be honored if you'd help us lead the first one." Jim looked at Elena. She nodded, her voice firm. "We could use someone like you." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "If it helps one of them think twice before laughing, I'll be there." The crowd didn't cheer. They bowed their heads. Because they knew, today they had witnessed something worth remembering. It didn't take long. By that evening, word of what happened at the clinic had already found its way onto local news sites. Small blurbs at first, buried between weather updates and council meetings. But the headlines grew bolder. Marine veteran publicly mocked for battle scars. Clinic responds swiftly. From shaming to saluting, local hospital issues statement after viral incident. Within 24 hours, a clip from the clinic's hallway camera was leaked. No faces, just voices. The cruel laughter, the mocking tone, the silence that followed, and the one line that echoed across timelines. Those scars aren't for sympathy, they're for silence. People shared it. Veterans commented. Gold Star families, nurses, teachers, sons who had lost fathers, daughters who had watched their uncles limp through Thanksgiving dinner and never speak of the war. The name James Kearns began to appear. Not because he sought it, because his silence had finally been given voice. 2 days later, the clinic launched its new training initiative, Respecting Veteran Patients, led in part by Elena and by James. He didn't give a grand speech. He didn't need one. He sat in front of a circle of young medical students and told the truth, plainly. "We don't carry scars to make you uncomfortable. We carry them because someone else couldn't. All we ask is that you don't make us feel ashamed for surviving." They listened. One student, barely out of school, raised his hand and said, "Sir, if you don't mind, can we see it?" Jim unbuttoned the shirt slowly, pulled back the fabric, revealed the long, rough scar. The room was silent, until someone whispered, "Thank you." A week later, Jim stood in front of his house, mail in hand. Among the bills and coupons sat a thin envelope marked Department of Veterans Affairs. He opened it. Inside was a letter. Not bureaucratic, not official. A single sheet, handwritten. "Mr. Kearns, I saw the footage. I don't know how to explain how ashamed I am. I've worked in this system for 12 years and somehow forgot who I was serving. Thank you for reminding us. With deep respect, a nurse." He folded the letter, set it beside the one he always kept, the one from the mother of the soldier he carried through the jungle. Then he poured a cup of tea and watched the wind stir the flag across the yard. It was Sunday. No alarms, no appointments. Just the still breath of morning seeping through the curtains and the hum of the old heater ticking against the baseboards. James Kearns stood in the hallway, holding a box. Inside, the bronze star, the purple heart, his wife's folded flag, and 2 letters. One, from a mother whose son lived because he didn't hesitate. The other, from a nurse he had never met. One who had found the courage to say what others wouldn't. He placed the box back on the shelf, not high, not hidden, right where the light from the window could touch it in the afternoons. Then he reached for the coat. He didn't pull it all the way closed. For the first time in decades, the scar remained uncovered. He stepped outside. The cold kissed his ribs, but he didn't flinch. He walked the sidewalk slowly, past the neighbors' homes, past the flagpole at the corner where kids used to play baseball until the streetlight flicked on. A boy on a bike skidded to a stop nearby. He looked at Jim's side. His mother called from a few feet away. "Eyes forward, Tyler." But Jim raised a hand. "It's all right," he said. The boy pointed, innocently. "Does it hurt?" Jim shook his head. "Not anymore." He walked on, past the library, past the church, down the slope toward the stone bench that overlooked the quiet field where his wife was buried. He sat. The wind whispered through the trees. He laid a small stone on the head of her grave, just like he always did. "Still carrying it," he said. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something lift. Not the memory, not the weight, but the loneliness of being unseen. It was gone now, because silence had finally been understood, and that was enough. If stories like this resonate with your heart, like and subscribe for more untold moments of honor and kindness. Let us know where you're watching from, and if this moment brought back memories you carry with you. The best way to honor their memory is to keep listening. Click on the suggested video now, and we'll walk together through another untold chapter of courage and sacrifice.